You're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. Please seek professional help.
When it comes to getting delicious energy drinks, things can get a bit messy if you just waste your time on the big names, because quite frankly, a lot of those aren't that good. I don't know about you. I actually find traditional famous energy drinks make me feel not jittery. They just make me feel a bit irritable. You know, I feel a bit on edge. I feel like I get energy, but it's applied in sort of a junky kind of a way where I just feel like I'm just a bit annoyed at stuff. Whereas one thing I love about Gamer Subs, here's a delicious flavour, cherry limesicle, the sweet cherry. How about Sakura Splash? It's a sour cherry, more of a tangy cherry, really. I find it has just a really smooth come up. I get the caffeine effect and the energy. It lasts a while, and then I don't get the harsh crash, and I don't feel like it affects my mood in any way. Also, spoiler, if you're one of those people who uses caffeine, let's say to get things going in the morning and go and evacuate parts of your body, works great for that too. About 10 minutes after you have some. It'll go like clockwork, don't worry. Obviously, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just esports. I'm just a physician of esports narratives. Get 10% off everything on the Gamer Subs website with the code Thorin, Thorin. So yes, essentially, if you want it to, it can help you shit yourself. So for all we know, maybe ZWoo took some before map 1 and map 3 of the grand final of the major. Anyway, obviously, wait a sec. Vitality did indeed, you know it, win the Blast Austin major, which was the third CS2 major. It was this team's first in CS2. They'd actually never even made it past the semis in CS2. Two of the lineup, ZWoo and Apex, had won the Blast Paris major, which was the last major of CSGO. And you know what? This was an epic major to win in the sense that they didn't drop a single best of 3 series, which, by the way, brings their best of 3, best of 5 winning series streak. So I'm going by series. I don't really care about BO1s. To 34 in a row. If you don't know, Team Liquid had the odd BO1 they lost along the way when they won their 22 in a row. 34 is unbelievable. It's actually, I think it's the best streak in the history of Counter-Strike. I think it's even better than Nip's 87-0 because of who Nip was playing. They came in as the biggest favourite in history. Maybe I'll one day do a video on that. Now, I actually did a little rant about that in one of my preview videos, so I won't run the whole thing back. Essentially, the candidates, when I was thinking about it, would be, I think Team Liquid 2019 was the biggest favourite. It's just the player break changed their form. If you remember, they won all the events. They won something like 5 in a row. They'd been in second in 2 before that. They won all these series in a row. It wasn't 22 at that point in time. They won 3 series, I think, at the major, so they would have been on 19. Yeah. But then again, they didn't have any players at the time except Stewie who'd won a major. ZWoo has won his major already. Apex has won a major. ZWoo was the best player in the world. They had Elise, who was pretty good, like I'd say top 5 player in the world, but they didn't have the best player in the world. Then you're going to go to like Astralis at Katowice 2019. I think they were a pretty big favourite because of the season they'd had the year before, but people forget they'd actually, by the way, I actually did a whole video about why Team Liquid was the biggest favourite video ever. I think it was on my channel, I believe. Astralis, when they went to Katowice in 2019, people forget, had earlier on lost the iBuyPower Masters to Team Liquid when they just got Stewie. Very Games in 2013 had won something like, I think it was, they'd won 2 events in a row. They won like an EMS, which was an ESL tournament, and a Star Ladder, where they were beating an IP, and then they lost the final to Clan Mystic, which is actually Apex, believe it or not, and Matt, his current coach, in a fluke fashion, and came to ESWC and then came to the major and didn't win it, but I think they were a pretty big favourite. And I think the other big favourite for me, would actually the underrated one, is Fnatic 2014 going to DreamHack Winter, because that was the one where they'd won like 3 lands in a row, and they were a bunch of times beating LDLC, the number 2 team in the world, again and again and again. So I think Vitality came in as the biggest favourite in the world of all time. They'd won 6 events in a row. They hadn't dropped a single series. They'd lost 1 series on LAN all year. They beat all their rivals. In fact, they'd been destroying MOUZ, the number 2 team, like 6 times in a row or something. They beat Falcons a bunch of times. They beat Spirit when they played them. I think they were as close to an unbeatable. In fact, I think they are as close to an unbeatable team as we've ever seen in Counter-Strike. As in, even though before that you would pick teams like the original NIP, Prime Navi in 1.6, SK Gaming back in the early 2000s. You'd obviously go with Astralis in 2018, not 2019. The difference is, though, in 2018, you could still beat Astralis. They sometimes would lose a game in the tournament, but then win the tournament. Vitality doesn't ever lose. You sometimes could win a tournament off them and beat them in the semis or the final, but then they'd come back and win the next ones. Vitality just doesn't lose. Like, even when they actually play badly, like they did at the odd map here, they still win the tournament and in dominant fashion. And when they're on, they are fucking dominant to a crazy degree. And I think they've got it all. I think they've got the tactics, the team playing, they've got crazy skill, but not like the craziest skill ever, but the amazing distribution of skill. So, interesting detail. If we go to their route, I think it's pretty interesting. Let's look at the Swiss first. Obviously, they got to start in the last Swiss, stage 3. They lost the opener, which ruined their match streak. I think that match streak should never have existed. I'll probably do a separate video on that. That is a creation of HLTV, as far as I can tell, who just decided that what we all care about is match streaks. I don't get why, by the way, because the Team Liquid epic streak of like 22 series was best of 3s and best of 5s. And IPs would have included like some BO1s, I'm guessing, in there, like 61 or whatever it was. I don't know why we're letting BO1s ruin the streak. What I care about is series play. That's real CS for me. And since the entire circuit, except the major, is best of 3s and best of 5s, why don't we just count best of 3s and best of 5s? So for me, their streak didn't end. Although this was shocking, not only because Legacy were the team not supposed to be at the major, who replaced Bestia because of the visa fuck up, and then it was on Inferno, which if you don't know, they smashed Legacy on at IM Dallas before this, and Legacy is a team of like, you don't think of them as like top players, and Legacy smashed them on it. It was 13-3, they absolutely body bagged them. Then though, Vitality just basically, we were actually on our game, flipped the switch, and then they were unbeatable in the rest of the Swiss. So Namiga, who admittedly I think is the weakest team in this portion of the tournament, mainly an online team, they destroyed them easily. They beat 3D Max very easily. They played VP, who normally can take people to 3 maps or have a close map. They just absolutely crushed them. Zimu fucking smurfed that series. And basically these 3 matches here, I think they won something where the opponent got like an average of 5 rounds a map. Like, that is impossibly dominant. So they came to the playoffs, not as a top seed, because obviously the way it works is you have the 3-0 teams, 2 of them play a 3-2 team, and then remember, these 4 teams here, the 3-3-1 teams and the 3-2 teams, 1-3-1 team, the highest ranked one, gets a 3-2 team. So in this case, it's all off the Bucot system, so it's not really randomised for these. It's based on like who you beat and all that jazz. So unfortunately, when FaZe Clan came here, believe it or not, FaZe was the higher seed going into the playoffs. That's just the way the tournament works. I mean, to be fair, look who they played. Aurora, MOUZ, and Mongols. Like 3 of those teams, by the way, are like top 6 teams in the world, I think. 6 or 7 teams in the world. Whereas over here, you played Legacy, Amiga, 3D Max, and then VP. That's just not a particularly strong lot of opponents. And obviously, here's the other issue. 2 of these teams made the playoffs. None of Vitality's opponents made the playoffs. So they did have a very weak set of teams in this Swiss, I will say. This was and this is the only Swiss they played. This was a very weak Swiss to play. One of the weakest I've ever seen. And then they got drawn against Na'Vi, because Na'Vi was the second, so it was just second place third out of these 4. Na'Vi themselves, by the way, okay, they played Spirit, who was a contender. Everyone else is pretty weak there too. G2 was actually better than expected, but still, weak teams, 2 of them the same that Vitality played. Na'Vi themselves not in great form, by the way. Don't look like a team that can even make a final, never mind win one. Remember, they got knocked out by fucking Huxi Astralis. Huxi standing in at that PGL. They should have been in the final or won that fucking PGL. So to me, you did get a nice draw getting Na'Vi. Like, admittedly, it was based on the Bucolts, but I think it would have potentially been trickier to play FaZe. Look, not how it actually turned out in the game. Na'Vi gave an alright performance. But I think they had time to prep for them all that jazz. FaZe just looked hot after the Mongols series because of simple. Who else? Mongols themselves, obviously we saw what they did in the final. You would have thought they were maybe even comparable to Na'Vi, but then again in the playoffs, at least Na'Vi players are experienced. Mongols always choke right. When they played Na'Vi, they could have actually lost Nuke the second map. It was a big Mezzi series, by the way. That was a pretty big one. Then they go to the semis. In the semis, they play MOUZ. Now, MOUZ is the number 2 team in the world on the rankings. They've had a bunch of finals. They've beaten a load of the other squads. Even they've obviously beaten Falcons themselves recently. The problem is, I don't think spiritually they are the number 2 team in the world. I think Falcons who were they going to change roster anyway, is the number 2 team. Remember, when Falcons got Monacy, they instantly made the Melbourne final and literally had Vitality on championship point, 12-6 up, I think it was, on Nuke, but just lost the series. Then they had another BO5 where they were really good, and they were beating all the other squads until the tournament after that, just before this major. The problem is, obviously, Falcons shit the bed in stage 2, especially with those 2 BO1 losses, didn't they? So this series, on paper, the problem is Vitality had beaten them 6 times in a row, and MOUZ had only won something ridiculous, like, I think it was like 15 wins for Vitality and like 3 for MOUZ or something absurd like that. And I think off the top of my head, were 2 of them on Mirage? Or was it Nuke? I forget anyway, but basically they had some close Mirage games too. Anyway, in the veto, the key thing is MOUZ picked Mirage, and that was actually won by Vitality. By the way, Vitality in the semis and finals won their opponent's map pick and lost their map pick, which is kind of bizarre, but that's another thing about Vitality. That's why I think they're unbeatable. You can't even get them in the veto, even if you win their map pick. You're supposed to have a chance to win the series if that happens. So the first map was a big one for them. They were dominant. The second map was where you actually saw a performance where, you know what, I don't even flame Vitality for losing this map. I think MOUZ on CT side only can do that if they have their shit together in the playoffs against anyone. They have not only a really nice skill distribution, so it's hard to pick what site to go to, but notice how they played no information game. They didn't do peaks, they didn't do gambles, a lot of stuff. They played very safe and standard and compact in the sites, and crucially, they did an amazing job doing crossfires, double peaks, someone peaks and then there's a flash ready for them, or a smoke, or someone's there to trade, and the way they played was actually beautiful. And then on top of that, Tosh, who I think has had his times in the playoffs where he was a bit dodgy. By the way, for the whole major, he actually wasn't that good. In this match, he was fucking inspired. That is actually one of the best CT side Inferno performances you will ever see from an AWPer. He was fucking smurfing. Really, really sick stuff. The problem is, if you've watched enough Vitality and this isn't your first rodeo, you know that it's not enough just to have a great map against Vitality. They do resets between maps. And they came back on train about they forced. And by the way, they are unbeatable on train. And they absolutely smashed it. 10-2 first half, and MOUZ was not bad, by the way. They were getting the odd kill, but they could never properly get into the game. Even people like Spinks and Tosh just couldn't do anything in this one. Exertion couldn't do anything. ZywOo went fucking crazy. By the way, overall in that series, yeah, it was really good shit by ZywOo and drops. It was basically what you'd want, what the doctor ordered. And the last map, especially that train, well, I think ZywOo actually was pretty sick. He had some pretty good highlights. He just dominated all the battles he was in. As I said, no diss to lose Inferno. Sure, but if shocking, maybe he thought it'd be 2-0, but at least he gave us some spice. Now, a lot of people would have said that's the real final. Spoiler, it sort of was. It sort of was. That was the best chance for them to lose of this entire playoff bracket. I'll get to that later. When they did come to the final, they played against Mongols. Now, Mongols obviously had a very bizarre route. They played FaZe Clan, who was a paper tiger. We all just hoped Simple would play like that, and he didn't in the match. And then the rest of them also. They could still have gotten Anubis, got to Ancient, but they didn't. And actually, Mongols sort of clutched out that game. Still close, by the way. Then they played Pain Gaming. By the way, probably the weakest team to ever make the semi-final of a major. There's weak teams that made playoffs, but the semi-finals, that is nuts. Like, even if Vanguard was, I'd say, better than this, because the new Pain lineup hadn't shown anything yet. So they absolutely clapped them. But the problem there is, Pain haven't been in playoffs, so you can't really look at that and go, wow, Mongols are over there choking, are they? So coming into the final, you're playing Mongols, who, by the way, you always beat. Yeah, they've won a map off you, and they've had some close games in the past, but they've only really been getting to semis of big events and then losing to anyone who's a top team. So you play against them. Also, people like Senzu have choked most of their career, 9-10s up and down. Mazzinho started to play bad. He actually played quite badly in this tournament. He is a young 17-year-old, even though he was having that purple patch at the end of last year. Bizarrely, Techno actually had a great final, even though who the fuck could ever have expected that? So you came into this one, and all day long, this looks like a 2-0, and this is one of the easiest teams to play in a major final. So again, should probably do a video about this. I was thinking back, the easiest teams on paper, I'll say this, a Vanguard 2019 at Starladder Berlin for Astralis, in theory, was easier. Because before the tournament, they'd never done anything of note. At least Mongols has actually been in like fucking playoffs of big events and even made semis and won some series and won a map of Vitality in the playoff, etc., etc., etc. The problem is, a Vanguard at Starladder Berlin, by the time they got to the final, had literally beaten Vitality with ZywOo in the round of 8. And by the way, Vitality at the time was considered like the second or third best team in the world. They'd just come second at Cologne, remember? They'd won CS Summit over Team Liquid. They'd made the semis of, I think it was the semis. Well, they made the playoffs anyway in IEM Chicago. They'd beaten Renegades in the semis, who you might laugh at, but actually they'd been in like the playoffs of the last major, and this is when they were just getting their shit back together. They were all a pretty decent roster for the year. Then you have to consider, actually, the last time Vitality won the major, they obviously played Gamer Legion in the final. Right, Gamer Legion had beaten Heroic, that's pretty big, but before that, they hadn't even beaten anyone good in that tournament. And before that tournament, they were fucking nobodies. I think you can, in theory, mention Immortals at Krakow 2017, because, I mean, I did beat VP, but that was the VP on the way out. The problem is, they also beat, like, Big in the quarters, which is nothing. Big weren't a top team at majors. And crucially, you might forget, Immortals wasn't that bad before that, actually. They had tournaments in the past with slightly different roster where they'd mixed it up. They'd had like some DreamHack Opens where I think they'd made one where they'd made like a final or something, or a semi. So they had some results. Still, Mongols is better than these teams. If you want to really go back, an underrated one would actually be Team Liquid 2016 at the Cologne final. People forget it was just simple carrying them there. It actually wasn't, like, remember, it came back as a stand-in. They played 2 events. One, they just bombed out of, like, ECS, and then they came to this event and just fucking came second in their group, comfortably second, and then somehow just won the hard side of the bracket, and they got smashed in the final. Ends 2019, they'd won, like, a star ladder that, like, not many good teams went to, and I think MOUZ bombed it. But aside from that, they weren't considered, like, a team that should even be in the playoffs. And then, believe it or not, Furia 2022, yeah, look, they'd been a team that had shown, like, strong performances, but they'd never won a tournament, for example. That might even have been the first big final they'd ever been in at that point in time. So there were other teams, but I think Mongols is better than most of those teams. So one of the easier opponents, but I was able to just list off 6 teams you could compare. Now, they had a bad first map. Let's go to that. They had a really bad first map. Mongols won the first half. It was close early, then they pulled away. By the way, no joke, Techno, the worst fucking player on Mongols, because remember, Blitz the IGL is actually a pretty decent fragger, and Mazzinho, even though he's young, he has some spicy aim sometimes, even though he's played badly in this series. Techno was actually winning clutches and getting key kills all over the fucking place. What a world. What a world. So bizarrely on this one, Zebu actually shit the bed. Apex was getting all the kills. Zebu shit the bed, believe it or not. So on this one, Mongols win the first map, which is their map pick. So we go then to Dust 2. By the way, normally they don't play Dust 2 in Mongols Vitality series. And now you see why Vitality has the option also to just go away from the map you prepped. Like maybe you thought it was going to be Nuke. Wasn't Nuke. So you go to Dust 2. I even said on my stream, I'm just going to go ahead and take Vitality very cynically with an under. And I'm going to bet on them to win. I'm going to bet on their players to win. Yes, indeed. When you went to Dust 2, it was Clap City from Vitality. They won CT half and then they just closed out T. Now look, what's interesting is on both Dust 2 and Mirage, there were a bunch of times Mongols got opening kills and it would be like 3-3 or a 2-on-2 or there'd be a clutch somewhere or a retake. They even won a couple of crazy retakes. The problem is on both Inferno and Dust 2, every round Mongols won took such hard work. And by Inferno, they just weren't winning any of the clutches. So it was really, and they had to win some pistols. So on Dust 2, crucially, Zebu was way better. Mezzi, by the way, was smurfing. Had a really great performance. Rops was great. Generally just a great session overall. By the way, a cool thing for Mongols is Senzu had a great tournament in general and was good in the final. The problem there is the AWPA 910 had been good on Mirage. He was non-existent here. I think he got like 0 kills on... Where is it? He got 1 kill on T-side. By the way, on Mirage, on T-side of Mirage, Zebu had 0 kills. Second half, 0 kills. Best player in the world, remember. He is the best player in the world, by the way. I mean, some people would say Doug, but I would say Zebu, actually. I don't know, actually. I could have an interesting discussion about that. Then we go to the decider, and again, I just thought, listen, the first map's 1,000,000 years ago at this point in time, boys. Vitality's here now. And you know what? It was actually, even though the score says they ran away with it, again, it was actually quite a back and forth game at times. Mongols was getting into the sites. They were getting the bomb down. They were killing Rops a whole bunch early on. It was actually quite a fucking interesting game. Believe it or not, the heroes of that one were Apex and Mezzi. Apex was legit. He forgot he was an IGL. He was just straight up winning aim duels. Really spicy style, wrecking people. Look at the CT side. And then Mezzi was also fucking just getting key kills late in rounds. Look how Zewu did in the third map on CT side. He didn't exist. He was irrelevant. But ZywOo starts slow, I told you, in big games, but he comes alive eventually. So crucially, on T side, he was all right. But Mezzi did his work again. By the way, what an unbelievable series from Mezzi. What an unbelievable series. And the problem over here is this. Senzu and 910, the two best players on Mongols, had a shit T-side on theirs. So they weren't able to answer. So for the overall map, big time performances by these three, believe it or not the 2 stars. And for the whole series, look, Rops was all right. By ZywOo's standards, this isn't good. Apex is unbelievable. And Mezzi, again, out of this fucking world, wasn't he? So to me, I think the key angles here is, I think ZywOo actually played very average in this final. And actually for normal players, like everyone, for his standards, he played shit. He actually looked scared. And if it wasn't for Apex and Mezzi, the 2 worst players on the team, who, by the way, every fucking ZywOo fan and a million Vitality fans last year wanted fired from their jobs, which, by the way, shows me you are cretins. Apex was really good last year as an IGL. And also, by the way, Mezzi has always been that player who fills in the gaps and allows everyone else to do their job. Go and watch how he played in the Cologne final against Navi. It's the reason they won their one tournament of the year, which was a prestige event. So I thought actually ZywOo played fucking shameful in this final. Now, to be fair, he smurfed the rest of the tournament, carried them to this point, and he still had a few key kills. Like on train against MOUZ, he was massive. On this one, he had a few kills on Dust 2 that I think were pretty big. He actually had like a 1v2 or something he won at one point in time. I think it was 1v2. Was it even on the pistol round? Could have been. Anyway, whatever. Whenever that was actually a pretty decent round. Aside from that, though, quite lackluster. I've actually never seen a superstar player like that get sort of carried by the bad players to win the major final. Like, I can tell you, if Simple ever played bad in a major final, it's just cooked. It's over. You got no chance to win. Same for Nico. Same for Device. Pretty much, I mean, debatable for Device because he had some bad moments in that VP one. So, yeah, I thought it was actually pretty bad for ZywOo overall. Oh, yeah, the other thing as well to show you is watch what, on the 2 maps they won, Dust 2 and Inferno, look on the T side at Mezzi. He smurfed both T sides. Like, he was literally the best player in the server. He was plus 12 and would have averaged like 115 ADR while also just staying alive a fucking like 85% of the time or something absurd. Now, on that thing about the difficulty of the bracket, I actually had a rant on one of my other videos. And what I realise now is, specifically for Vitality, it's not actually that it was that weaker bracket overall. It's that if I think about when I'm hyped for the playoffs and the idea someone other than Vitality can win, those aren't the teams that I want them to face. I actually don't think, if you think in history, it is one of the weaker brackets overall in terms of who they played. Crucially, who they played. Not the overall bracket. I think the overall bracket was quite weak because you had 2 of the top 4 teams. One of the top 4 teams in the world, top 3 teams in the world just eliminated early. So I think the interesting thing is this. The problem is the rest of the circuit has conditioned me to expect a harsher tournament because the rest of the circuit is all BO3 and then it's BO5 finals. In the BO5 finals, you only play elite teams. They didn't here, they played Mongols. And then also, the rest of the teams in the scene outside of the top 4 are just weak in a very peculiar way, which I'll get to later. Now, by the way, I actually think this final in history will get stronger as the year goes on, because I think history will look back and people will see the Mongols. And I actually think after this, they'll probably start to get their shit together more in playoffs. They look effective now that Senzu can play. Even people like Techno were having fucking big rounds. 9-10 played great generally for his level. So I think as their rankings go up, as they make more semis, maybe they make an odd final themselves, I think history will look back and go, wow, Mongols was good though, yeah. But you have to realise this was the first event they really properly got it done against a top team. And even then they didn't win, but they at least made it interesting. And they actually did make those second 2 maps way better than the scoreline says. It was way more player than you might expect. Now with that said, I don't think this should have been a 2-1. For who Mongols is, this should really have been a 2-0. You should have won Mirage, but you just started slow. ZywOo had a bad game. They actually made some heroic plays. By the way, Techno won like some 1v1s on that fucking map. So, just one of those miracles that happens when you're in the major. Just like, by the way, they have the miracle of Mezzi having the Life series. Just like he had fucking Magic's was even better last year for Spirit, obviously. I do think that it was a weaker bracket. Here's my angle. In terms of quality in the threat, in the server, or like threat to Falcons. Because the teams they played had good rankings, but that also shows where their scene's at. So they had MOUZ, who was the number 2 team in the world. So that's obviously a fabulously good team to play, right? It is, but it's also a team that Vitality completely has the number of. And they don't win big tournaments. Like, we don't really know what they'd do if they were facing a Falcons or a Spirit in a final, because it hasn't happened this year. The problem is they only face Vitality, and so I do think they've got a little bit of chalk in them still, but I'd actually like to see them play another one to see maybe again, MOUZ over the rest of the next season will show us that actually that name value looks better. After that, you have Na'Vi, who before the tournament was ranked number 7. Now, I thought they were a pretty sus number 7 because their map pool is dog shit. Their players have fallen off big time. And that's basically just like making out of groups that got them to that ranking. They're not a team that's done damage. They haven't really even contested after Katowice. They haven't really ever contested to be a team that would be in a final. They're actually very lackluster. It's just that obviously the name value on paper looks fucking insane, doesn't it? Like, oh my goodness, it's the team of the year from last year, which it was. It's a major winner. It's just they're not any of those things now, are they? In terms of like who they are today. And then Mongols were number 5, but they're mega chokers. And it's a major final. They've never even won a series at the majors before in the playoffs. So my issue here is this. Even if you go elsewhere, first of all, there are majors that I think just have flat out better brackets in terms of the rankings. So if you go to Na'Vi's one, where Simple One is major, they played Vitality themselves, who were ranked number 3 before the tournament in the quarterfinals, had Zero in that tournament team, by the way. They played Gambit, who admittedly a lot of it was from online play, were number 4. They played them in the semis. That's Shiro and Axile. Then in the final, you played G2 before the tournament, number 6 ranked. That had Nico. And that was, by the way, one of the best years of Nico. That was a really special year where he took another level as a rifler in terms of adding other elements to his game, in my opinion. And he played awesome in that tournament. Astralis face it, London 2018, I usually say is the strongest bracket. They played, I think it was FaZe in the round of 8. I sometimes get this wrong. I think Team Liquid was a semi. So they played FaZe in the round of 8, which they'd just taken Carrigan off IGL, but it was still the FaZe that had won all those tournaments and almost won the Boston Major. They were number 6 ranked, and that was a close series. They beat Team Liquid, who was the number 3 team in the world at the time. I actually think they were true with the number 2, but Na'Vi had won Cologne. And then in the final, they played Na'Vi, the number 2 teams. They played number 2, number 3, and number 6. So I think those 2 majors were better. But you know what? Fair enough. Actually, by ranking, this was one of the better playoff runs by the guys from Vitality. But here's my problem. First of all, I think if you wanted this to be epic, you actually needed them to have Spirit or Falcons in the final. You needed it to be Donk, Monesi, or Nico that they were facing. That would have made it really historic and special. My real problem, I guess, isn't with Vitality. You can only beat who they put in front of you. It's with the top 10. The problem is after the top 4, which is, in this order, in my opinion, Vitality, Falcons, MOUZ, and then Spirit. After those 4, then you go to Mongols. They were chokers before. Aurora, they are giga chokers, but both Mongols and Aurora are really good in group stages. Then you have Na'Vi, who gets out of group stages. They're going to be like your 7. After that, you just get into the fucking weeds. Now you got like the Team Liquids, FaZe, like, where the fuck? At that point in time, you're all over the place. Like, you're getting down to like 3D Max or something like. These aren't, if you look in past years, you would have teams down like the Norths of the world, or the G2s could be like 6 to 8 in the world. But they'd have either like world-class players, or they could like win events or go to semis and finals. And you just don't have that in the current scene. It's actually the current top 10's not very strong after the top 4. And then Vitality dominates even the top 4. Now, the significance of this major was big for a lot of the players. Zebu's now won 2 majors, one in CS2, one in CS2. No one else has done that, obviously. Except Bit. Thought you can't be slipping, didn't you, Mofo? This is his second major MVP, which if you're only ranking those and not looking at who they played on, that puts him equal with Coldzera, with Device. So of the CSGO CS2 list, he'd be at the top now. Although, by the way, I personally think Device should have 3. I think he was actually the best player overall at the first one they won. And if you ever look at his numbers, he literally could have won all 4. Again, it was largely based because that team was so even out by who had the better final, tended to be the ones. Hence why Kirby got the first one and then Magus got the third one. I think he could have won literally all 4, which you can't say for any other player, by the way. I mean, the others didn't win 4 majors, did they? And Dupree could have won 1 major, by the way. He never won a single finals MVP. So hence, when you go, 5 majors, shut the fuck up. This is a conversation about the greatest players ever. He wouldn't be a top 10 greatest player of all time. He'd have a top 10 greatest resume of all time, probably a top fucking 2, wouldn't he? But that's how that goes. So I actually think for Rops it was huge because, first of all, he was right. He needed more firepower to play with. They just didn't get it in FaZe. Now, the what if now is this, right? What if FaZe at the end of the year listened to Rops and they actually had gone and either they'd signed Simple or maybe they'd have made a crazy play for Monacy or they'd have gone out there and got an up-and-coming fucking stud player who could be... They didn't, of course, so that's just a what if. The problem for Rops is this. He obviously can't be the best rifler, can he? Because Donk might even be the best player in the game. So he's not the best rifler, Donk is, but he is an exceptional player. And it's just sad for him that Donk exists. Otherwise, he'd get the title best rifler. I think it's pretty legit. He's also, as I've always said, mega impactful player. And actually has mastered that lurking style. He's so fucking smart and just doesn't die easily. Flames won on his birthday. Remember, Flames used to just be the super streaky, fun-loving kid who just pressed W all the time on both sides, on OG, mainly playing online, and then just stuck in purgatory, could never ever get anywhere deep in a LAN tournament. He's just won the fucking major. People forget he wasn't in the Vitality that won Blast Paris. That was Dupree at the very end. And by the way, absolutely, one of Zonic's smarter moves was cutting Dupree to bring in Young Flames on a free transfer, and then they immediately won that Game as 8 tournament, although I think they won the Game as 8 tournament without Zonic. I think they already had Extaz at that point in time. But anyway, I believe he was the one who did make the move to remove Dupree. Apex, I actually think, is the best captain in CS. He fragged out in the final. He won his third major, one as an entry fragger back in 2015. Then he won 2 as an IGL. This is his second. One was CSGO, one was CS2. By the way, what an amazing resume he has. He has the most medals in terms of trophies in CSGO and CS2. He's won 33 now, if you don't know. He is one of the best IGLs in CSGO, CS2 history. The GOAT conversation is premature, though. That is premature. But I tell you what, if you want to put him in the conversation, if we're taking 5 names, he can get in there. It's just I would immediately remove him and it'd just become Glaive versus Carrigan again. Mezzy is the guy people wanted cut from this team. They were making... you don't know the shit Zewu and Vitality fans have talked on this guy. But I think for what he does, he is like the fucking British reincarnation of fucking Zipniks. He was so good at this major too, by the way. And I think this year he's been so good. He's really held his own and been someone who brought the floor up so the rest of them had the platform to exceed everyone else. And when Apex and him are frag, you can't do shit against this team. And as I said, he was key winning Cologne last year, another prestige event. The problem is you go to his second ever event, which was the Blast World Finals 2023. I think he had a bad stats performance. Everyone wanted him cut even though they won the fucking tournament because that's what Zebu fans are like. Now, for the season, this is epic. I'm going to do loads of content on this coming up, don't worry. Vitality won both of the prestige events, Katowice and Blast, the major. That's epic. They won 7 straight tournaments. There only were 8 tournaments they attended, and they attended all the best ones. They won the Grand Slam within that one season. So there's the $1 million right there. They won every best of 3 and every best of 5 at the events they won. And over the whole year on land, they lost 1 best of 3 series. The first one to Eternal Fire, now Aurora, who, by the way, actually has a decent veto in terms of all teams because they had the Anubis that they were super strong on back then. And it was still close. And then they lost 1 BO1 to Legacy at this major, complete shock out of nowhere, and then smashed everyone after that. And then they lost 2 maps in the playoffs. That was still hard work for the other team to win. I mean, not as much for MOUZ on that one, I guess, but certainly the Mongols one was hard work. So I think already the era's cemented. This is it. This was the Vitality era. It might continue on, obviously, might become even more, but it is the Vitality era. They've almost certainly cemented Team of the Year already because they'd have to not only have someone else go epic for the next season, but they'd probably have to do shit. I think they're the best CS2 team ever. There's only been 2 years of play, admittedly. And I do think genuinely, not just the results, when I look at the eye test, this could be the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. Sometimes when I watch them play, I think they are. And I've seen every great team going back to literally 2000. Every great team and every great match of CS ever I've watched. I've watched some of them behind the players. I've known the player. I think this actually might be the best CS team of all time. They seem like the most dominant in special ways no one else ever was. But I'll do other content on that. Zewu won every MVP at those 7 tournaments they won. So he is also the odds-on HLTV #1 player for the year. And by the way, especially because, again, surely Vitality's going to win more events, so he'll get more MVPs. Maybe once eventually Rops will nick one from him. And remember, he can get the MVP from the losing side, even if he loses in the final. Now, by the way, that's where the MVP count for Zewu is accurate. although I would remove the online ones from everyone. But I will say, people don't realise he has an advantage that people like Simple and everyone else doesn't actually have, which is they didn't used to let you win the MVP if you came second. That's how Device won more MVPs in 2018 than Simple, the number one player. Because he was winning all the tournaments, and then he would be the best player on his team and have the best numbers, and he's the opposite, the best plus minus. So then he would just get all the MVPs, even though he wasn't the best player in the tournament. The point is, Kenny S crawled. He started doing it against Fnatic back in 2015. And Simple walked, so Zewu can run. So if you're actually a Zewu fan, you should thank Simple, mate. He's one of the reasons now, think of DreamHack Marseille 2018, why, no matter how dominant the team in the final is, if your guy smurfs the rest of the tournament, you get to be the MVP. Spoiler, I actually do think he still would have won. I actually think Donk would have been MVP of the Shanghai Major, even if FaZe had somehow won that last map. Because he was so insane both in the final and the tournament. I think he would have just been the MVP. I don't think he would have given it to Rops on FaZe, even though he was awesome. So I will address that whole thing another time too in a side video. So I think all in all, just epic stuff. I really actually enjoyed the Vitality run in particular. Other aspects of the tournament were a bit weak. I think the format has just shown it's fucking played out. Please get rid of best of ones. Get rid of best of ones on the same day. Why do we need 3 Swiss stages and then we only have fucking 7 playoff matches? Can we just have best of 3 in every single Swiss match? Can we have a fucking BO5 final? These all seem like obvious things, right? Can we, instead of it, look, MRQs are gone. Can we just have the top fucking 20 teams qualify or top 16 or something? So that as a result, Gamer Legion and Astralis would have been here with their rosters. That could have actually done something at these tournaments. It's more of a wine elsewhere, but that could be its own video. You know, I'm always rep my set, and the people who've got my back are the following people who support my videos. Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know the all-time ride or die, Jerky's minion, isn't it? Special thanks to him. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me where you set the topics? Maybe you want to ask me a question for my video AMA? Well, all of those perks and more are available where? At the Patreon link in the description box below. So put your money where your mouth is and join the Screwminati today. You dig?